Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
We are recording. Via Hedera, welcome to Weird Web Radio. I'm really stoked to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm glad to hear it. And for all you folks tuning in case you don't know who Via is just yet, Via is the author of a very incredible book I highly recommend, titled, and this is a mouthful, Folkloric American Witchcraft and the Multicultural Experience, a Crucible at the Crossroads. Any listener to this show knows how goddamn obsessed with I am with Crossroads. So, the bio from the back of the book. Via Hedera is an esoteric researcher, folklorist, sculptor, operating a blog dedicated to research regarding folkloric witchcraft and New World and the multiracial American experience. Growing up in a multicultural and religiously diverse environment, Via has spent her life dedicated to the study of folk magic and witchcraft in America from can't speak today because words are hard, a cross-cultural perspective. Now, that is packed full of awesomeness. We're not going to talk about any of that yet. Welcome to season 6, everybody. Via gets to kick it off. I'm really excited that you chose to be a part of this. In the past of this show, I have always loved to talk to, especially occult practitioners, about ghosts, because no one really does that. And I've always tucked it at the end of the episode. Season 6, we're going to flip the script. We're going to put the ghosts up front because I'm curious. Tell me, Via, have you ever experienced a haunting?
Absolutely.
Oh.
There are places in this world that are so full of spirits, you almost get lost in it. There are places just nearby, even on Mount Rainier, they call them haunted meadows, where you can hear the whispers of these spirits and these hidden tribes in the mountains. There are all sorts of incredible haunted places, but even personally in my life, I would say yes, my life has been haunted by the spirits, and I think that's why I choose to make more friends than enemies.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Have you got like a favorite experience, something where you experienced a haunting, maybe a location or something that happened in your own home that really stands out?
Absolutely. I would say the experience I had the first time I ever went to Mount Rainier. I had moved up here to the Northwest from California when I was 8, but I had visited a lot since then. And when I first got to go to Rainier, I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I went up with my cousins and my sisters, and we were a pretty outdoorsy family. We were always with our grandparents, and they were always outdoors, so my grandma took us up there, and she was real superstitious about where we should and shouldn't go. And I always thought, that's pretty normal in my family. Everybody's real superstitious. There is no question that there are spirits, that there are ghosts, that the dead stay with us if they don't pass on elsewhere, that this world is inhabited by inhuman spirits, things that have never lived, things that have never walked with us, but move in between this and other worlds that we couldn't imagine, things that would be nightmarish if we could actually see them with our living eyes. So that was just a normal, that exists. And, I always thought, I thought you think your parents are kind of bullshitting you. And we went up to this peak, and there was a meadow there that was way down in the valley. And my grandma said, we're not going over there. We're going to go somewhere else. There's probably bears over there. You don't know. She made all sorts of excuses for us not to go see these beautiful blooming flowers. But as we passed near it, I could not understand why the flowers were moving the way they were. They were moving like something was stepping through them, pushing them aside, sort of going against the wind, and they sort of wavered in directions that it just sort of draws your attention when you're looking right at it. And you think, oh, there must be a really small animal pushing the brush. But the way the wind moved and the way it sounded like there was just a chatter on the wind, and it was bone chilling. It didn't feel, I would say it felt definitely dangerous and definitely not human spirit. It was not something I think I would really understand if I met it. And I could see why legends for over 100 years have stated that there are meadows on these mountains in the Cascades that are full of whispers and hauntings, because I felt that chill and I never wanted to go back, and I never went back. And if I go to Rainier, I never go up there. I never go anywhere near the meadows, because the meadows, they are haunted by otherworldly people, and I think different cultures have different perspectives on what these or inhuman spirits or entities or tribes of people can be, these hidden tribes. And I get the impression that they were a hidden tribe of people, ones that, I may not be able to see, but definitely can be heard and felt. And I would say that experience, the way it follows you up and down the mountain until you get out of the woods, it can be pretty terrifying. It can stay with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. You keep saying hidden. I like that, especially when it comes to Mount Rainier. I've spent a couple weeks in Seattle many years ago, and one thing I noticed very quickly was, like, some days you could see Rainier and other days you just simply couldn't. And I was asking my friends out there, like, what the fuck? I'm from the prairies. We can see for miles, and the stuff's always there. Like, you can see it. And they'd be like, oh, it's just the disappearing mountain. It was just so nonchalantly. It's just the disappearing mountain.
Yeah, we have a phrase for it. We say, oh, the mountain's out today. And if the mountain's out, that means we can all see it's a real nice day. And if she's wearing her hat, it means it must be snowing or raining up there, because there's a little circle of clouds that billow right over her. It looks like a little hat. But everybody says the same thing. Oh, mountain's out today. Cool. It's not going to rain for at least a few hours. Awesome.
I don't think I was there long enough to figure out all the folklore attached to the mountain.
There's a lot.
Yeah. So do you think the hidden tribe that's in those Whispering Meadows, like, do you think they're, I don't know, not welcoming, I guess, not interested in allies in the flesh? Do you think they're kind of pushing you away with the vibe they have?
I definitely get the impression that they do not want to interact. And, some of the local Salishian tribes do actually reference why some tribes were afraid to go up the mountain, because they didn't want to disrupt the hidden tribes that lived there. Sometimes that were referred to as demons, sometimes referred to as ghosts, sometimes referred to as ogres and giants, and sometimes referred to as simply another kinds of people who simply look different from us, and they're not welcoming. And I think I think maybe in some small way it helped contribute to why the meadows are so very strictly protected on Rainier, and why Rainier is very protected. You can't just sort of traipse about anywhere you want to go, and they really do recommend staying on the path, because people die there every year, walking off the paths. Every year somebody goes missing. It's a dangerous, very liminal, very quiet place that hasn't had too much human interaction. You're not going to find a bunch of garbage there. You're not going to find a lot of signs of human life in some of these meadows that are farther up the mountain, because they're so well protected. And I think there's a lot of local respect amongst people of all kinds for the superstitions of the mountains, which is, never mess with the meadows and the flowers in the meadow. It's sort of like the old European custom of not crossing fairy rings. You wouldn't want to cross into that. You don't know what they're going to do to you. Fairies, man, they got all sorts of motives and aspirations that you don't want to be a part of. And the same works over here. These hidden tribes, they don't get disturbed enough to have gotten used to us, I think. And I prefer not to mess with them. I never got the impression that they were into interacting with me, at least.
Gotcha. Yeah. Hey, and listen, folks, when a witch who is as steeped and skilled in folklore as Via tells you to stay off the meadow, you stay out of the fucking meadow, okay?
Yeah, take pictures from the path. I wouldn't traipse right in there, though. Nah.
Right.
Miss me with that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's move into a way more complicated subject.
Sure thing.
Pop culture witches.
Woohoo! Oh, I love this one.
This is your fault, by the way. I happen to be looking for something new to watch on just to kill my time. Not like I don't have a book to finish writing or anything. And there was a new blog post at the same time posted by you. And it was all about Motherland, Fort Salem. And I thought, oh, that looks so cheesy. And then I hit play and I became obsessed. And it's all your fault. Do tell. what makes that show so interesting and special enough to call out on a blog about folkloric witchcraft?
I know, right? I've never written about, I mean, I have loved some stuff in my life. I loved The Love Witch. That movie was, to me, perfection. I love all the old witch movies. I've seen them all a million times. I like anyone who grew up in the 90s, love The Craft and Practical Magic. We all love it. And recently I've loved Sabrina, and I've loved Penny Dreadful a lot. But then there was just something so unique and fascinating about Motherland Fort Salem being based on sonic magic and on the power of voice and sound, able to lock your voice into things. Because I work like that in some of my work, where I will whisper, some of my evil deeds or my malicious things into my puppets, or I'll whisper lovingly over an erotic doll. Like, you have to put sort of all parts of yourself into the kind of magic that I do. So it was kind of just absolutely rad to see them base it on the power of sound and the voice of a person, the strength that their voice has. And I was like, this is going to be cheesy. This is crazy, but I love anything based in, America. I love American stuff. I loved it when they were like, oh, it's about the American military ruled by witches. So I'm like, already this is striking my patriotic fancy. Yeah. And from episode 1, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was BIPOC friendly and queer and femme and just so awesome. And the cast was really great. And it had its cheesy moments and it was silly and I loved it. I loved it. I loved the lack of demons and just a lot of the sparkly stuff, the poof that come out of the hands magic. This was just the voice, the power of it. And I thought it was fascinating. And then they got to the stuff with the mushrooms, not to be a spoiler for people, but there's mycelia involved and I was sold. On that.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah. Shout out to the Green Mushroom Project. If you all aren't familiar with that, go check out last episode with Lux Estrada, please. All right. So the sound, I thought that was really cool in there too, because like when I create my own rune sets, I work with the Elder Futhark a lot. And when I create my sets, I feel like I'm like birthing them into the world. I look to the heathen lore of fire and ice and the creation myth to bring them forward with the way I burn them into the wood and I cool them down by waving ice over them. But when I'm carving the rune in there to begin with, I will first begin to whisper the rune's name, just like I'm trying to wake it up almost like Fehu, and then keep rising in tone until you're practically singing the word and as it comes into existence. I thought that was fantastic little touch on there as well. My favorite part of all that, as a father of 3 daughters, one of which is a very young, she's still pretty young and is also getting interested in witchcraft. I thought it's nice for her to be able to look to just general entertainment and see herself reflected back, which you didn't get much of growing up, I would wager. Yeah. I know I didn't get much of even as a dude, right? Who was interested in all these things. So it's nice to see that shift happening slowly in entertainment. I think it's a great stride forward with that one.
I think it's really empowering. I thought the message was great, that the power of your voice to speak up for yourself, to generate power from just letting yourself speak is so empowering for young people. And I know I would have loved that. When I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of mixed kids on TV that looked like me, that were being portrayed like me. And there wasn't a lot of pro occult anything. And definitely, stuff in my childhood, I felt like queerness was sort of catered more towards the hetero male gaze and not as much towards, these are just authentic queer relationships. And I kind of loved that Motherland was like, look, this is what it is. And let's just normalize this and not make some fuss, and let's let people feel like they can see themselves. And I kind of saw myself and was like, this is awesome. If I was a teenager, this would have been like the top of my list. But as a teenager, what I was watching was primarily Degrassi. Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, that's fair.
It was great, but
now you're talking about growing up, and that is kind of the order of conversation I was looking to have, and I'm glad it came up that way because I've heard you talking about your early childhood experiences on other shows. I've seen you write about it in your book. And in part of that, you've talked about how magic was always there. It was always part of your life in these different areas and different homes and so on. What I'm curious about are like, what's some of your favorite memories of specific kinds of magic that you were encountering as you grew up? Not just the fact that you did encounter it, but what really stands out?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. Something that sticks with me that I still do, worry dolls.
Yeah.
The little stick dolls. My mom she'd make them herself and she'd beat them, and they'd be so elaborate. She's beautiful at beating. She'd make some of the most fabulous chokers, and she would make worry dolls for us. And she was like, "Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and tell your drama to the doll because Mama can't hear it today." And you're gonna go ahead and rub this doll, put it under your pillow. She'll take care of it. And there was something so incredibly comforting about that because there was so much trauma going on around us. You know, East LA was a rough place in the early 90s. My mom was a teen mom. There was just a lot of gang activity around us that directly impacted our home. Not to get too detailed, but just a lot of, that kind of stuff, a lot of just naturalized violence around us. So it was sort of this incredible way that she was like, you need to leave this world and go into your imagination. You need to astral project. You need to leave this place mentally until we can get out. And part of that was giving us worry dolls, which I always loved. And she was a young person still learning too. And she was learning, at the time, she was learning Santeria from my tia Virginia. And she was learning her own roots as somebody who was displaced and who is adopted out and is mixed race and sort of didn't know a lot about where she came from. She was sort of exploring magic as she was going too, and it sort of just reinforced in our home that was a world that you can go into that can help you out. It's a power, it's a resource, it's a thing that we're all using in this household that's going to slowly get us out of these circumstances, and it did. We pulled ourselves out, but that's what better magic is that than the kind of magic that parents come up with to pull their kids out of crazy circumstances. That's incredible ritual magic right there. I just sort of love that worry dolls. And my mom also had this, I'm not sure where she got it from, but we had tutelary deities in our household. We had deities that were specific just to our little household and our family, these emblems, these personifications of things. And that was one of the magics that I think I loved the most, was this just fervent belief that there's a poppy mother and that the poppy is our flower and that's our family flower and that's what we do. And we all love the poppy, and weirdly, yeah, we all did. My grandparents always grew poppies. My grandma loved them, passed it on to my sister. I have heirloom seeds from my sister's garden from back when she was a teenager. So, back in the late 90s, we just pass along poppy stuff, and it became this personification of everything powerful and magical and unkillable. And I kind of love that was such a big part of our household, and as was like the worship of different spirits of the seasons. The personifications of the seasons were like, they were a real thing, like an energy, a deity that we all felt, and we all belonged to very different religions. And I thought that was pretty fascinating, that despite all these differences, people sort of saw the world the same in a lot of regards. And I think some of my favorite stuff has to do with protecting people, protecting the children, keeping the children occupied from all these violent going-ons, all these things that are going on around them that are just too big for such little people to carry, And I think that's pretty amazing that my mom kind of knew to put us in this magical circle, and encourage that and be like, yes, there is magic, and yes, there are spirits, and yeah, we will find a way out, whether we gotta, cut something, do some, poison. I don't know how we're getting out, but we're getting out, and we did. And I always thought that's intense magic. So I really loved the worry dolls. They kind of brought on a lot of good things in my family, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful magic too. I mean, it's born out of love and the desire to protect those that you love. I really like that. And the personification of seasons, very cool. So being surrounded by magic like this, you say your mom was learning Santeria and these unique practices that are just kind of bubbling up in a magical home in a way. When do you realize you're a witch?
Well, growing up around folk magic practitioners who were Christian in religion made the word witch, as taboo as it ever is. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved that. And I was very much encouraged by many of my aunts. Now, I come from a auntie family. So since many of us are adopted, most of us are adopted, family to us has zero to do with blood, genetics, lineage, anything like that. So I have about, I don't know, 50, 80 aunties, and I can't tell you how they became auntie, but they are auntie, and I have to take orders from them and do what they say and honor my elders because that's how it is. And you don't ask questions, you do what they say. But I had an auntie who really got me. I had a few aunties who were, one was Wiccan, that was my Aunt Daphne. But my Auntie Dawn, she bought me some of my first books when I was about 10 or 11. I think she did to needle my mom, honestly. But she bought me a bunch of books on witchcraft from Cunningham and Buckland and the old classic standards. And she was like, I know you like fantasy and I know you like fun and I know you like magic. So here you go, kid. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to call myself because I don't belong to my parents' religion. My dad's a Baptist. My mom's is somewhere in between all sorts of things. My sister's a Lutheran. My grandparents are Lutherans. It's a little complicated, and I had no pressure to like join any of their religions. That was pretty nice. They were like, you got to come to church because we're going, but you don't have to join.
But, you're not staying home by yourself.
Right. And, I don't blame them. I wouldn't have left me home. I would have gotten into all sorts of shenanigans like witchcraft and devil worship. And then what happened?
Right. if you all could only see the way her eyes lit up when she said witchcraft and devil worship.
Well, all the fun stuff in life. I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old where I was like, I like the word witch and I'm just going with it. And I know I know it has a negative connotation, but I'm not saying I don't have some of those negative connotations. I know what I am. I know I'm just an animal in nature and doing what animals do and doing it my way. And sometimes that means I am the devourer and I am the hunter. And sometimes that means I am peaceful and kind, but I think that's precisely what makes me a witch is I'm willing to choose between the two for my own benefit, and I don't care who says what about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you found that side of it coming from the 90s material, because something I've often said, maybe unfairly to a point, but I came up through the 90s too, is that it seems to me that the 90s did everything they could to take the sharp teeth out of witchcraft.
Yeah.
And in a reflexive, defensive way against the satanic panic that was starting finally to wind down in the mid-90s, there was still, I think, a fear there that we had to somehow be acceptable at the water cooler at work. Like it had to be okay and somehow safe. And I don't know. It's unfortunate that there was so much of that because I think it almost stunted growth for some potential witches.
I agree, which is why I'm so grateful that the first thing that I thought to do when I started studying witchcraft itself was go to folklore, because I didn't understand where some of these spells were coming from. There wasn't a lot of context in Cunningham's books about where he got the information about the folkloric background of some of these plants. So I was like, I'm digging. That's what I was taught to do, is go sit in a library and stack books around yourself. And then go out and ask a bunch of elders what they heard and what they know, because they're going to be the story keepers. They're going to know, and they're going to love to tell you all about it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I started to do. I started looking at folklore, and there's so much teeth to magic. There is so much grit. It gets under your nails. It has blood and bones and grief. It has all the range of the human and the animal and the cosmic experience in it. And you can see why we would choose to wash that out of magic itself and try to popularize that, I think was a very unhealthy move on our part as a community. It's not all love and light. Life isn't all love and light. Nature is lit. Life is harsh, and it's beautiful and hideous. And we were meant to live that. We're meant to soak it up and die by that sword. That's the way it is. And the more folklore I read and the more I saw, there's lots of devil, and he's not always the bad guy. In fact, he might be the good guy in a lot of these tales and stories. The more I saw self-protection, binding, exorcism, track spells, the more I saw how much people were willing to get dirty to push along in life, to progress, the more I felt sort of inspired. Like, my ancestors are hardcore, and all that dirt led here, right to me.
Right.
And I'd like to pass that tradition forward.
Outstanding. I dig it. What a great answer. So with this background of folklore and practicing witchcraft, what does it mean to you to actually be a witch?
Ooh. It means, well, first I'd say it means giving myself over to the idea that nature and these connections we have with everything that's in it, every tree, every microbe, every leaf, every process that is living, that is dying, that connection, that animistic connection, the belief that there is a spirit inherent in all of this world and that we are connected to it and we are sharing in that soul and in this experience, and that there is no soul that's particularly greater, by cosmic virtue than any other. That, to me, is this source of witchcraft. The idea that that's where magic comes from, that is the magic, that this whole function of life and death and the sun and the moon and the balance that's found there and all these mechanical systems in the cosmos that are keeping our planet where it's at, in this perfect place where we can live just for this brief blip in the billions of years that have existed. It is everything to me. Everything from the death of our elders to the birth of a new child to everything in between that's waxing and waning and eating itself and eating each other and eating its own offspring. That is this entire force. And to be a witch is to say, I work within those harmonies, and it is at harmony. Even the chaos is in its perfect harmony because it is ever creating and ever destroying. And that's the universe, and just feeling that closeness to it, feeling like I'm a part of it, that I'm no greater, I'm no bigger, that the things I do matter because I'm connected, but ultimately don't matter because the universe is so great that I will never understand its mysteries. To me, that is witchcraft, and that's why I'm a witch. I feel a connection to that, and to those harmonies, and I want to weave them. I want to manipulate them. I want to mess with them. I want to step all over them. I want to get lost to them before it devours me, because it will, and there's nothing that'll stop that. So I figure, why the hell not have fun on the way,
Right. Now, what's the payoff then? What do you get out of this? The benefit, the reward of being a witch and working with all those things?
The experience of not being bored for the short time I am alive.
Yeah.
My vanity. I don't want to be bored. I want to be comfortable and happy and entertained. And I don't know what'll happen when this ends. It could all blip right out and then none of it mattered. But for this short experience that I'm here, I want to fill it with so much magic and mystery and fear and terror and fun. I love being afraid. I think that's why I love roller coasters so much. But
I'm out on those.
I love that. I just want to know that I spent what little of this so-called life we have filling it with all this stuff, just devouring and loving it. I want to live in the ecstasy of magic. I don't want to repress myself or deny or fast or do anything. I want to be an absolute glutton for it. What else is magic for? That's the fun of being a witch, is devouring and flying and, riding guys and fun shit.
A glutton for it. Yes, absolutely. What challenges do witches today face? We've talked a lot in a way about the 90s, but this is a different time. And in some respects, it's a lot easier, I think, in the wider culture, just simply to be a witch. Maybe some of that is the benefit of, showing the safer face for a couple decades. I don't know. But there are certainly risks and challenges still. What do you think they are?
I think right now, what I'm seeing a lot of witches who are coming up today facing is this identity crisis of where do I belong and what am I allowed to do? Where is it coming from? Who am I hurting? Am I appropriating? Am I colonizing? Am I misunderstanding? If I don't have a teacher, am I legitimate? What, what, how do I know that anything I'm doing really matters? Am I doing it right? You know, I think the questions kind of were like that when I was coming up, but there is this distinct fear today that you are, as a young person, perhaps, you know, offending people or stepping in the wrong direction, or you don't even know where to start. A lot of people have no idea where to start in witchcraft. And I always encourage people to go everywhere, absorb every bit of wisdom you have, and implement what works into your life respectfully. When you want to pursue community engagement, do so respectfully, join a community, be involved, contribute, sit with your elders and listen. That's always been something that I'm very heavy on with people who get into this is, you know, if you ever feel like you don't know where to start and you're afraid of being disrespectful, sit with your elders, contribute to your society, contribute to your community, be of service, and you will find that it's a lot easier to make friends, people who will guide you, people who will encourage you to think for yourself. And if I could tell people coming into witchcraft right now anything, is please think for yourself. Don't feel the pressure. Don't worry that you're going to be hated, and don't allow yourself to be. It's so easy now. You know, there wasn't this kind of internet presence when I was a teenager. Like MySpace came out when I was like 18, 17 years old. So it was like social media was not like this. It was AOL chat rooms or Yahoo chat rooms, and there was a lot less harassment and a lot less cruelty in some ways. But it's gotten a lot more global now, and there's a lot of pressure on people to be right and to be perfect and to present. And I'd really encourage young witches to please just absorb all the knowledge you can. Knowledge is free. Knowledge is for everyone. There's nothing you shouldn't know. You should know anything you can, and make your own decisions. Be your own independent person. And eventually people are going to get over this need to destroy those that they don't agree with and destroy people for having missteps through life. I'm hoping that sooner rather than later we can get past that little issue with our infancy as humanities, this need to destroy people when they're wrong, or when they didn't know any better, when they're trying and they're trying so hard to learn. And I hope we can be a more forgiving community, a more peaceable, together, unified community. And that's kind of what I was hoping to get across to people in my book was this isn't an issue that needs fighting about or arguing. It needs upholding.
Yeah, I mean, you have a very unique perspective, I think. Well, first, you're a very unique voice, and that you're willing to share so much of yourself. We talked a little bit about that before we started recording. Like, it's a rare thing, I think, that when people are very protective of their personal challenges, even failures at times. And you don't seem to shy away from any of that. And then you have the further perspective of someone who has entered the realm of witchcraft with mixed ethnicities. And I'm certain you were treated in less than desirable ways because of that.
Sometimes, but you know, Mr. Rogers always said you got to look for the helpers, and he was one of those straight up magical people in the world, and I really believe that. I always look for the good moments and the good people, and I think there's an overwhelming amount of goodness and kindness, and I think the community is really going there. This folk magic community that's building on Instagram is so supportive and mutually kind, and we're not about hurting each other. We're about just educating each other and arguing kindly. It doesn't always have to be this vicious takedown for the viral sensations. Sometimes people just need to talk. And I'm sort of loving where the folk magic community is going. I think because it's folk magic, and folk magic means the common people, the folk, the everyday person, understanding them and their ways and everybody's slight different way of magic. I think it's starting to improve.
I agree. Yeah, I this is something I've seen reflected too in my kids. You know, I have children from the age of 9 to 24. It spots along the way. Not every year. My goodness, no.
Oh, Lord. I was about to say, damn.
Yeah, a 9-year-old, an 18-year-old, 24-year-old, and the stepson's 14. And it's been interesting to see, their generations as they develop. You see a lot more just kids that are mixed ethnicities and different cultural backgrounds. People who have come from families that are Hispanic and black, or black and white, or white and Hispanic, or all the above somehow. And
Yep.
I want to believe this so badly that it's like their generation that's going to finally get it right. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but they certainly are getting a lot more right than we did, and it's encouraging. I see a lot of promise in them.
Absolutely. It's always improving just a little bit, and I'm loving this new generation. They're so much more conscious of other people's feelings and a little bit more willing to hear criticism of themselves, and I really respect that.
Same here. I think it's a beautiful thing. I really like that you say the folk magic community, which is a community of people spending a lot of time talking about urine, blood, bones, dead things,
horseshoes,
boiling cats, nailing horseshoes, and they're doing it kindly, with respect.
Yeah. With respect,
With
but
respect.
Not taking any shit,
That's right. Yeah. Don't take any shit. In your Invoking Witchcraft interview you were on recently on their show, you said that you recognized a folk magic user may do exactly the same as you as a witch, but not see themselves as doing witchcraft. And you even conceded that point because you went on to say they're not using the same source. What did you mean by source?
I think people draw their power from different places, from different channels. I think if you asked a practitioner of folk magic who considered themselves a Christian, they would say that they're not drawing their source of power from the source that I'm drawing mine from, which is from an entirely different source that they may frown on. For me, it's all about relationships. And to them, they're pulling this power from the relationship they have with Christ the Savior and with their God. But I am not drawing my source from God or from Christ. I'm drawing my source, I'd say, from nature, from the void that eats everything, from that darkness that's prevailing, from nature and life and death itself, which are all pretty much the same thing. Just an endless cycle. That's where I feel like my source is coming from. And I want to have respect for people who are not witches but are practicing magic. I don't want to assume or place them in the same basket with me, and I don't want them to feel alienated by my speech. So I'm very careful, because I have a lot of people in my family who do practice magic and would not consider themselves witches whatsoever, or even pagan. Some of them would consider themselves very strict Catholics. Some of them would consider themselves Baptists or Lutherans. Are they still putting pennies above their doorway and putting cobwebs on their kids' eyes for a swollen eye or stye infection, or saying little prayers here and there that they believe truly will disband spirits, or smudging the house? No, none of that changes. They're all still doing the same thing, but they're not witches. And wherever they're drawing their power from, I don't feel any source of power from. I don't feel any great connection to what they say they feel a connection to. But I do feel a connection to nature and to that void and to that all-consuming darkness that is where everything comes from and goes in the end. I feel a connection from that, and I'd say, magic in the end is probably all pulling from one source in my point of view. But I am very cognizant that some people are channeling it through sources that I don't understand and I don't work with, like saints or God. And I have a lot of respect for that. That's where their magic's coming from, and it works for them. They dispel spirits. They clean their home. They make progress in their life with that magic and where it's coming from. And they wouldn't do well with where mine's coming from. And I probably would do well with where theirs is coming from. And I respect that.
Yeah.
Two sides, same coin, though.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I remember one time I went to a tarot client's home to do the tarot reading, and her mother had just passed, and her mother had lived with her for some time before her mother died. And I went into the house, and this is a a southern black family that ended up in the north somehow in the last 20 years, and they had these really neat different southern customs that I wasn't sure of. I don't care. It was fascinating. Great people. And I go in and I notice that there's these different colored candles on the mantle over the fireplace. And I couldn't help. I commented on them. I'm like, that's interesting how those colors all line up there, because it made me think immediately of like some people who do hoodoo that I know.
Yeah.
And my client, she turns around, she goes, "Oh yeah, that was Mom's thing. She burned that candle if we needed more money. She burned that candle if I had nightmares. She burned this candle." And I say, "Oh, was your mom a witch?" And she just stared me down. She goes, "My mom was a good Christian, thank you."
Yes. Yeah, I had a moment like that too, and I think all of us who have that moment quickly learn to go, "Okay, all right."
Yep. You bet. Yeah, she sure was.
Oh no, she didn't say "bless your heart," did she?
No, she didn't. I just smiled and said, "Well, Mama had secrets. Let's do this reading." Yeah, it was good. It was really interesting time. Oh man, so something you point out in that experience of having all these different kinds of like religions and practices of magic plugging in different ways is this reality that, and recognizing that magic comes in all sorts of forms that often people don't call magic. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, we don't all call it magic. I love that. I love the range of definitions and perspectives we have. I love that. It's so human and it's so perfect and it's so good to have. I don't ever want to live in a world where people all agree with me. I can't stand that idea of living in a world where everyone looks like me and agrees with me and thinks like me. I want to be challenged. And I love that people challenge each other with the different ways they see magic, or with the different ways they see empowerment, energy, whatever they choose to call it, this changing force that they truly believe somewhere deep in their soul, or maybe even at the very surface level, somewhere in there, so many humans, I'd wager to say at least a few billion of us, truly believe that we have an impact that is beyond the physical world. And I think that is a powerful connector of people. It is seen in so many religions. It is the power of prayer, the power of blessing, the power to swing a thurible or a censer and suddenly the evil spirits are dispelled. And in their world, in their ways, it works. It works for everybody. Magic works for everyone, no matter where they're pulling that source from or who they say it's coming from. Almost every culture has their own values of what magic or mysticism or mana or energy or spirit or medicine is. And they have any number of words, incalculable number of words for this effect that we have on each other. And to me, it's a connection. I use magic because it's a simple term, but when I'm thinking of it, I always think of it as work, as spirit, as just work I'm doing. It's what I do with my life. It's the natural way of living. And sure, maybe it's magic. I don't know. Maybe it's something else. I call it that because in my culture, that is what I was taught to call it. That's my Western word for it. But what it really is to me is this indefinable power that is connecting so many of us. And we share that. And that's kind of amazing. This is a beautiful sharing human experience. And it makes us a lot more similar than different in some ways.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about... I've got a few ideas here. Let's talk about something you have in your book that I found really interesting, the way you started to explain it. And I think it'd be awesome to hear you say it as well for folks who should be buying this book. Let's talk about witches and initiation.
Yes.
Why is it important? On one hand, and maybe not on another.
Gosh, where do you start with that?
Right.
I think initiation by the spirits is something you can either pursue yourself or it can happen to you. And there's a lot of folk magic to support both, that it can be a thing that's bestowed upon you that some people would call a curse and some people would call a blessing. It can happen to you. You can become witched, or you can pursue it by choice. And that's a very powerful pact to make. And any which way you do it, there's all sorts of fascinating and fun rituals. And everything from shooting silver bullets at the sunset or the sunrise, to walking around a stump, or to turning backwards 3 times and slapping a rag on the water, to just calling out to the man at the crossroads when you get there 9 nights in a row and saying, I give myself over to you. Teach me the banjo. Just there's a million ways in one to become a witch. And sometimes it's just even the way you were born. Redheads have been accused of just being witches, and having too long teeth, or being born with the caul over your head. There's just so many fascinating ways that people are said to gain a specific connection to this magical world. And I always thought that initiation by the spirits is the first step to being able to work with them. It's not even, I don't even think of initiation as someone walking up to you and performing this specific ritual, but the initiation of a relationship between you and a spirit who is willing to help you or work with you or answer to you or make you answer to them, depending on how that goes down. You never know. But I really love the idea that initiation is just a core part of being a witch, and it can happen to you at any moment. It can be as simple as you wishing really, really hard in front of a mirror at midnight, or just giving yourself over in speech, saying, I give myself to this. I suppose one of, the most common ones is kneeling down and with your hands on either side and saying, all that lies between these hands belongs to the devil. It can, or, insert God's name here, whatever it is you go for. But right. I love that moment because it's establishing a relationship. It doesn't have to be this lengthy occult process with fasting and a year and a day and all this stuff. Sometimes it can be a wish that you really wished for very, very hard, and some spirit or some connection out there heard you and forged that moment. And that was enough. And sometimes initiation can just be whatever it is you want it to be. And I think it's an important step. It's you saying out loud to the spirits and to nature, to the world itself, this is the path I am taking. I am opening myself to you. And I always love that process and the different processes of it, because they're always so fascinating and fun. And I think it's an important step to just have a moment that you take with the spirits or whatever it is you choose to work with, even if it's just yourself. If you believe it's yourself who gives you that power, that initiation period, that moment of ritual where you establish a relationship with you and a source of power, I think is an important step in witchcraft.
I agree.
Just in the tradition of it. But,
yeah.
For me, it was very important.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's something you'll experience multiple times as you pursue these
Absolutely.
arts, for sure. Is there an initiation experience that you can share with us? Or are they all private?
Most of them are very, very private. But I could say that when I decided that I wanted to pursue folk magic very specifically, and I had already established a relationship with the man at the crossroads, and I had already seen what lies there and what my choice would be, and decided whether or not I wanted to live that deliciously or not. And I was like, hell yeah, I like the taste of this. I definitely, I took up that mantle and decided, I love this ritual. Somewhere out there were other people out here who did the same ritual. And the idea that it's cemented in this folk magic from places all over. I did go to the crossroads, and I did kneel with one hand on my head and one on my foot. And I did give myself to the crossroads as a way of sort of formalizing this confirmation for me of, I'd prefer to be a folk witch. I just want to do what feels right, what feels intuitive, what my ancestors were doing. I want to pursue what the people here on my land that helped build me built for themselves. I want to know how they worked magic. I want to know what they were doing to create so much mystery and so much incredible history that lies behind us and ahead of us. And I want to be a part of that and really I love my ancestors. I have a great relationship with them. I want that connection. So I went out and I made that connection. And, it was cold and rainy because Seattle. And it was this beautiful, muddy, rainy path on the Ivy. And I went down there 9 nights and I knelt. And I felt like that connection that I established wasn't even what I imagined it would be. I half imagined a man in a tall black hat and some horns and some hooves showing up with a rockin' Telecaster talking about Rio. I thought it was going to be so cool. But instead, I just sort of felt like I've come full circle. I've gotten back. I've actually felt more of my ancestors there waiting, because I finally reached this liminal place, this place where I went to the middle, to the place where they were waiting. And I interacted with my ancestors more. And in that moment, I was like, this is far more empowering than anything else, any relationship I could ever pursue. And that was the moment I decided I'm just going to be a servant to the spirits in gratitude and in thanks, because they serve me so well. And I have such personal relationships with some of these spirits that I think it's what some people would consider when they're praying to a deity. I'm doing something very similar with these spirits. I'm feeding them. I'm housing them. I'm having a relationship with them. I'm considering them. I'm including them in my prayers. And for all that, I've experienced a great deal of good luck in my life and a good deal of compassion and love. And, that's the power of the spirits. That's the power of service to the spirits. And when you meet them at that crossroads place, wherever it is, whether it's the literal crossroads in a rainy forest or the crossroads of your life, that forging of a relationship is immensely powerful.
I have a theory, and it's a deep part of my practice and what I teach, that all of us as magic users, especially those of us in the witchcraft and sorcery realms, we are living, breathing avatars of that crossroads power. The more we practice. And I stand at my altar every morning and center myself this way before every act of magic, before every divination I do. I say, I stand at the crossroads, and I am that crossroads, and go about my business, acknowledging that I have embodied that sort of liminal existence.
That's me. In the evening times, I light my candle, I light my smoke, I pour the water, and I repeat the words, somewhere between the sky, the sea, the land, in between these worlds is where I stand. I serve the bones in the land, and I stir the dead that lie within it.
Yours sounds so much prettier. Yeah. I can't take credit for it. I got the idea from Aidan Wachter, author of 6 Ways of Weaving Fate, and just a fantastic human being.
So fantastic. Just great.
Yeah, the man is my brother in every way that matters. So he's my magical uncle, not my auntie.
He's fascinating. That's great. Yes. Great literature.
Yes. You talked about your ancestors a lot in there, and I know from earlier in the conversation you were talking about how you're adopted. Now, I teach ancestor courses myself, and ancestors come in many forms, not just those of blood and bone, but many other forms. But I'm still curious, when all of us as practitioners turn to our ancestors and start to really dig into this concept magically and spiritually, I think there's a natural inclination to want to know more about those people you came from genetically for a while, right? Before you start to get interested in the wider spectrum of what ancestor really means. What was that like for you, as someone who's adopted and turning to ancestors? How'd that shape up?
Well, like you said, ancestors can come in all sorts of shapes and forms, and working with immediate ones was, the first place I started. My great-great-grandma was alive up until I was about 9. We had a really close relationship. So when she passed, I was like, you and me, you're going to be talking forever. It's going to be great. Granny.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. My great-great-grandmother was alive when I was young. She lived to be 107 years old.
104. And she looked great. She looked great. And it was, she was my mother's grandma, and so my granny's grandma, and my grandma adopted my mom. And so genetically, we had no connection, but she couldn't have told nobody in our family nothing like that. You know, no one would hear anything like that. And I always thought of ancestors as sort of some of the immediate people I met, like my grandmas on my other side, my great grandmas, who were also had lived for a short time while I was alive, enough for me to get this connection to them and to understand that they were going to protect me, and that these were magical, insanely intense people in my life. And you know, when my mom started doing genealogy and finally met some of her birth family down in the rural South, she went to Alabama, and then she went to St. Pete, Florida, to find out where all of her birth family was. They were just the warmest, kindest, most wonderful, moonshiningest people we ever met. They were so fun and cool and eating gator, and I was like, you are my people. They were just some of the sweetest people. And they were just so excited to see my mom, because she was a disappeared kid. You know, her mom was a teen mom and just left. Didn't say where she was going, got in a car with friends like a hippie in, you know, 68, and drove to Washington State, where she gave birth to my mom, which then it became very obvious why she left the South. Because my mom was mixed race. At the time, she was listed as mulatto, one of those fun terms of the ancient history for you kids out there, which is what they used to call mixed people. And, you know, meeting the family, they were so excited, because they were like, we always wondered where this missing piece was. We knew there was a baby, but we didn't know where you went, who adopted you, what happened. And they gave us so much incredible information. And I instantly felt this connection to my grandma, to my mom's birth mother, and to her whole family. They were just these hardcore drunkards and really fun gamblers. And they all had a bunch of kids, and that were, you know, missing dads. And there was just a lot of intermarrying, and there was just a lot of fun stuff. They were like really radical people with this huge American history. And I loved it. I loved what I came to learn, but what I started to recognize was that some of the spirits I had already met when I was a kid were people that they were showing me photographs of, or people they were describing. And I was like, you're describing somebody that I, for the life of me, thought was just haunting my house. And you're telling me that this was like great granny's aunt's sister's cousin's friend's Charlotte. Like, she's just a family friend like that. Like, okay. And I really loved that sometimes that would happen. And I'd be like, I knew that name before I heard it when I met these people. Sometimes they would tell me cousin's name, and I would just write there and be like, I know that. I know that name. I've seen about that person you're talking about. I thought the house was haunted, honestly. And I loved that. I loved the connection I felt. And there were some ancestors where I didn't feel anything, and there were others where I'm like, who the hell are you, and where are you coming from? But you only show up when I am like out of my mind in ecstatic trance, and you show up and you're like, hey, what's up, cuz? And these relationships started to develop, and I started to realize there was a lot of people walking beside me being protective. And I loved that, because I recognized them somewhere in me. And sometimes they were related to me, and sometimes they were related to me in the way that I feel really matters, which is when people love you and they choose to form a bond with you. It's not a bond that was created because you happen to share blood, but because they picked you out of all the 7 billion people, 8 billion people on this planet. They loved you, and they picked you, and you were their special person. And that creates a really, really special bond. And for the people that adopted my mom and her sister, they loved them, and that was enough. And that those people are with me now, who are gone, including my aunt. She passed away a few years ago. She, like my mom, was adopted. She was from Korea, and she stays with me too, and I consider her one of my ancestors. And she's definitely the one that gives me my hardcore take no shit, curse everybody kind of mentality about life. And I love that. I love that power is so strong. And I wish more people knew how intense the spirits in your relationship with them can be. It's not just magic. It can also be the magic of the spirits is something entirely different. And it's a relationship.
How do you experience spirits? Do you have a physical sensation? Do you see them? Do you hear them? Is it just kind of a knowing? How do you know?
How do I know? I'll
How do
admit,
you know?
it starts with a whisper. Sometimes it's a whisper you can hear. Sometimes it's that chill up your spine. You know, when you're listening to a song and it's a song you love and you're anticipating that one moment where it's about to have that great breakdown and all of your skin goes up in chills. And it's like, it's a pleasurable feeling. It's like you're excited, but you're also a little worried. That's what it feels like. A little nervous,
Okay.
but so anticipatory. And to me, it feels sort of like a whisper, because that's usually as it starts, is this sort of, I don't know, like a ringing or like a drop in the pressure in the air, where I'm just like, I'm definitely not alone. And it's something that I hear all the time, you know, but there's this sensation of when they're near you or they're focused on you, because they're everywhere. The spirits are just everywhere. They're invisible, and they're bigger than we can imagine and smaller than we can fathom, and they come in every shape and size and nightmare form. And the ones I'm working with, they never appear to me visually. I don't walk around seeing their faces completely, but I definitely see them when I dream. And dream magic is a huge thing for me. It's a huge part of my work with the Mother of Poppies and with the spirits of dreams. Is that's where I do most of my visual work. But when it's in person, it's this intangible pressure that builds up around you. And it is a lot like waiting for a roller coaster to drop, or waiting for that great part of a song to start, where you just feel a little bit nervous but so happy. And especially when it's someone you know loves you. And sometimes it'll be accompanied by like a smell that'll break your heart, because you'll remember that's just what she smelled like. Or there's times I'll smell roses, and specifically tea rose, and I'll tear up, because I know great great grandma is visiting, and I know it because I never smelled that smell without her. And it'll just pass right by, and maybe it's my memory, maybe it's something I made up in my head, but in that moment there is a connection there, and that's when I get to work.
What would you tell someone who lost like a grandmother, as for instance, that they loved more than anything, right? And then of course they pass, as they're prone to do, and we all have to. And time goes by, and they say they don't experience anything. They don't hear them. They don't dream about them. They don't feel anything except that just aching loss that carries on over time. I know people like this. Is there anything you think they could do to become more reassured of their grandmother's continued existence, or to feel that connection?
I think, unfortunately, there are just some things in this world that have to be accepted, like the absence of some spirits. I don't believe that every spirit lingers in a place that we can touch them, and I don't believe they always phase back into our existence. Sometimes people are just gone. I've experienced that, where they don't come back and they don't visit, and all I have is the memory I can leave. I have alive for them. And that is an acceptance that we all have to make. That's a part of the coping mechanism, the strength building of being a human and being a witch too, is accepting that there are some things that are simply out of our control. Chaos is the great end all be all in this universe, and it will take and it will feed, and there is nothing we can do about that. And fighting that feels good, I'm sure, but I prefer acceptance. I prefer accepting that my mortality can come at any moment, and we can lose the people we love at any second, and it's going to hurt, and you will suffer, because all life is suffering. And that's something, I learned a lot from the people in my family who were Buddhist, was that all of this is impermanent, and it's all suffering. And we all are all experiencing it. So that we have together. When we most feel alone, remember that there is someone out there that shares in your grief and in your suffering, that is sharing in that chaotic moment. It is on us to create something out of that destruction, because that's just what life is. It's creating out of death, and it too, whatever you create will die. And it's a natural process, and it begins and it ends and begins. And I think it's better to just sort of fall in love with the impermanence rather than with your own sadness about it, because the sadness won't feed anything. It won't really create, but understanding and accepting that there is a lack of control here. There are some things that magic we will never be able to control. that acceptance is very powerful, and it can free you and make you less afraid of the spirits, the ghosts, the mysteries of the world around you. You have your own witchcraft. It can make you unafraid of those consequences because you're ready for them, and you're ready to pay whatever cost that is, depending on what it is. And we all have to pay. That's the first law of magic. If there ever is a law, is there is always a cost. There is nothing we do, no moment in life that costs nothing. Every moment costs something, including our grief. So use it and make something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And former guest on the show, actually the voice of the introduction of the show, Lothar Tuppen, said when he was on here, an animist is only as alone as they want to be.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's
yeah.
maybe, and maybe that's where my whole acceptance and it's all good thing comes from, is because I am a very devout animist. I truly do believe I am constantly surrounded by spirits, whether I see them or not. And I feel no particular sense of superiority or inferiority about it. I just feel like, well, we're all animals, and I happen to be the omnivorous type, and woe be to the animal smaller and tastier than me.
That'd be a great dinner prayer, right?
Oh God, I'm going to use that.
Let's all gather to say grace. I'll go this time. Yeah.
Allow me. Hold my beer.
That's right. Woe to the animal who was tasty and smaller than me. That's fantastic. Maybe that'll be the title of the show.
Woe be.
This episode. Woe be. Yeah. One more thing, I think, before we head into the Patreon portion, something I pulled out of all the different things I would like to talk to you about. And I think it fits. It would be foolish to leave this out at this point based on our conversation. I like to go through your social media before you come on my show and find something like a tweet and say, defend that tweet, or an Instagram post and be like, explain yourself, right? What were you thinking that day? And the Instagram post that I chose for you was a picture you posted of all these different devil cards from tarot decks, which I thought was fantastic because I'm tarot is my occult drug of choice, and I indulge often. So, but you said on there, the title of the post was like devil all the time. And the devil has come up a lot in this conversation. So as I said, it would be remiss not to get into this a little bit. What role does the devil play in your witchcraft?
The devil. We're all talking about a different person when we talk about the devil, or a different entity, or a different spiritual being. We are all talking about something entirely different. What I'm talking about, I would say, is the King of Witches, the Lord of the Crossroads, the Man in Black, the Horned Hunter, the King of the Night, the in some places he's got a face made of leaves, in other places he's got a crown of horns. In my practice, the Devil of the Crossroads is the teacher of wisdoms. He is the bringer of enlightenment. He's a great illuminator, a Promethean deity. He is the spirit that illuminates that part within witches that wants to go fly. And he's got his counterparts in his court, and I don't interpret him in the biblical sense. I don't see him as Satan in the biblical sense. I don't associate him at all with anything other than nature, the crossroads, the compact we make there with the spirit world. So the devil I'm talking about is the same guy that's going to teach you the guitar at the crossroads, or enlighten you, or trick you, or make you give up your soul, or all sorts of fun things. He's I don't see him as a deity of maliciousness. I see the devil personified as the spirit of the crossroads in that particular sense. I wouldn't say I am some devotee or a worshiper. I'd say that he's simply the king of witches, and as a witch, I prefer to serve him just as I serve the queen of witches and the mother of the crossroads. And we all interpret that all a little bit differently. And I'd say for me, the devil is the teacher, the illuminator, the bringer of light, someone who is, or something, I should say, that is a trickster, and that is probably very unknowable, and that we work with at our own discretion. But he's an eternal part of life. He's part of the chaos of life, and pretending like he doesn't exist just doesn't work for me. And I don't believe in seeing him as some great parallel to the great good. I don't believe in a great good or a great evil. It can't be that easy. I can't see the cosmos as being that particularly easy. That answer, I mean, anyone could come up with that, but
Right.
everything has a scale to it. Chaos, order, all of it. And that little bit of that slice of chaos that we live with as witches, that we hedonistically take pride in, or that we revel in, or that ecstasy when we fly to the Sabbats, when we leave our bodies, when we go to dream, when we scream and throw our hair out and rip up roots in the ground, that moment, that wild, complete nature that wants to hunt and to feed and to fuck and to have fun, that part, that's the devil. We get along pretty well.
That's my kind of devil. Yeah, that's my kind of devil. You know, it's funny too, as you describe this force in that way. The whole time I'm thinking that could just as easily be talking about Odin.
Yep.
Right. A major figure in my work. When you talk about the Queen of the Witches, I do have a little note here. It says Hecate ? Because of some things you posted on social media. Do you have a practice that involves Hecate? Is that who you mean when you're talking about the Queen of the Witches?
I don't mean her. She's, for me, she's a liminal intermediary between the worlds. She is that place I first go to before I open rituals. I ask her to open the doorway because I know she stands there, and I know that if I get lost there or I die, I'm really going to want to be on her good side and have her take me good places. And she's such a loving mother. She is a nurse of the young, and the power that she exudes, this incredible strength she has to decide when I'm moving between the worlds, whether I'm about to have a good trip or a bad trip, and she's that guide. It makes me very, very careful about approaching her and acknowledging her as a queen of witches. She is a guide of witches, which are people who tend to move between the worlds. They tend to live with one foot in this world and one in a different one, or the many different ones. And so she plays the role of being in the middle. But when I'm talking of the Witch Queen, I'm talking of a bunch of different things. I picture the Hag of Winter as my Witch Queen, as the inevitable biting frost of winter when the dark year turns, and her tide's about to turn. When the equinox comes, the land will grow cold and dark, and she'll rule in all of her beautiful frosty glory. And to me, she's the hag that rides at night. She's the spirit of witches we're talking about when they climb on their butterdashers and their broomsticks and their backwards sheep, and they go riding off into the night and haunting and, braiding up men's hair and riding them like animals and being just naughty succubi, all the best stuff. That's what I mean by the Witch Queen, is this whole court of spirits, much like the devil, this court of tricksters and teachers. And like in that way, I would say that the Witch Queen for me is the court of spirits that rides at night in the feminine, in that wild sabbatic way with our clothes off while we shout in the night and scream and make spells and haunt people and give them nightmares. When I think of the Witch Queen, that's who I'm thinking of.
Oh my God, if people could just see your face when you say these things. I don't know for sure that when you speak about witchcraft that people rush out to find any way they can to become a witch. I just know they do.
I hope so.
I just know that when you speak, witches are born. That's all I know for sure.
I hope so.
I'm sure of it. Where can people learn more about this witch king, this witch queen, as you're describing them? Where can people source that information? Because that's not a way you hear it described hardly ever.
I would say you'd have to go sort your way through the great history of folklore and folk magic throughout the old world and the new. A lot of this, the concept of the witch king and witch queen, is very distinctly Western European, especially, very, very popular sort of ideas that are coming out of there that have made their way over here. And I think people, if you search through folklore and search through all these many different kinds of the devil and different kinds of hags and witches and great spirits that are talked about, you'll sort of find your own way. And I chose to personify, or I chose to see these personifications the way they do, because that's how they appear to me. For some people, they have other names, Nick Nevin or Kaliuk or any number of ancient deities that are hags and hunters of the night, riding with wild hunts and with the host and with all that great darkness and wonderful things. People call it all sorts of things depending on where they come from. And where I'm coming from, reading through American folklore, there's a lot of night hags, nightmare hags, boo hags, haunts, haint women, swamp women, swamp witches. There's this classification of spirit witch, where they're not a human, they're a spirit and a witch. And they fly at night, and they make witches, and they ensnare all of us human witches into going with them and getting naked and kissing the asshole of the devil, all the fun shit. All that great.
All the fun shit.
Yeah. I interpreted it that way. And the same with the devil. I read through all these great American folklore collections from Wayland D. Han and the Brown Collection and Puckett and Hurston. And the more I read, the more I was like, this trickster devil that's sometimes very helpful and not at all malicious and cruel, and sometimes definitely teaching people some comeuppance. It felt completely real to me. This is the entity that I'm finding at the Crossroads. When I go there, I'm seeing this trickster and the nightmare hags that ride at night. And for me, that is the Witch Queen and Witch King, because they're the ones leading my hunt. They're the ones leading me on my journey and taking me throughout these other worlds. Maybe that, and for other people, they'll have different names. Every culture has their own way of interpreting the nightmarish hags and the devils. And I love that, because that means somewhere out there, we all kind of had this experience at some point in history where we were like, there's like a dude at the Crossroads and there's like some nightmarish witch women out there who are riding me at night. And I love that we all sort of interpreted a lot of these things that way. I think it's a very connecting human moment. So I would encourage people to look through the folklore of where they live. Look through the folklore of the witch queens and the fairy queens and the hags of night and the devils and the hunters and the green men of where they live, and find their own interpretation of where that stands for them. This one works for me, and it works for me as an American witch, but wherever you live, try to find that, because there are witches, and there are spirit witches, and there are devils, and they are just delightful to play with.
You are not wrong. You are not wrong. If I may insert some books I would like to recommend after that entirely great thing. Your book, of course, Folkloric American Witchcraft and the Multicultural Experience, covers some of this. And I do want to encourage people to go out and buy your book, New World Witchery by Corey Hutchison.
Yes.
Corey has been on the show. Go back and listen to that episode with Corey. His book is a ginormous tome of stories and collection of folklore. And Corey is such a wonderful human being that he'll even lead you down that rabbit hole and tell you where his sources came from and so on. And if you're looking for ways to immediately practice in this style of witchcraft, I personally would like to recommend Besom Stangen's Sword by Christopher Orapello and Tara Love McGuire. Also, again, former guest of the show, the host of Down at the Crossroads. They'll get you well on your way. So grab those 3 books and you'll be doing great. I promise. Better than I was in the 90s.
Absolutely.
All right. I think this is a good spot to say goodbye and thank you to everyone listening. Is there anything that I should have covered, could have covered, that you wanted to talk about?
I think we're good.
I think we're good. That's a great thing to hear. All right. Tell everybody where they can find you and all of your work.
Everybody, you can find me on Instagram at Via Hedera. You can find me at www.viahedera.com. You can also find me at Facebook under Via Hedera. I love to talk, I love to listen, and I love to share anything and everything about folk magic. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and I agree. Please go find all of Via's stuff. I'm a big fan of her writing, her blog, her book. I've been begging her to be on the show for quite some time. And here she is. So, oh, happy day indeed. This has been great. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And as everyone who regularly listens to the show should know by now, and all the newcomers are about to find out, the conversation will continue. We're going to carry this over to Patreon. If you'd like to be a part of that conversation, you're going to have to come join the membership. Go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership, and you're in. You'll get access to that and all of the amazing archives. Season 6, folks. We're here.
Ow!
Can you believe it? Unfucking believable. Stay weird, my friends. And it's bonus audio time. Via Hedera, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. First question around this place is always the same for your first time. I say this because I expect to have you back again. What famous person's resting place do you most want to visit?
Oh, man. I want to visit.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions and magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.